Hello there, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today I am going to teach you how to play Rayman the board game as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, just so you know, this is not a sponsored video, but we are doing some sponsored content with Flyos games, including a full Helter Skelter 4-player gameplay and a preview video. I'll leave a link in the top of the video description where you can swing over to the Kickstarter page and check out this game a little bit closer and back it to support them if you'd like to see, well, more chaos added to what is already a bit of a helter-skelter, chaotic prototype. Along with that, I'm not going to go into too much detail on some of the areas where the rules might be more flexible, as this is a game that is still in development, coming to Kickstarter, and I only have a prototype copy. I want to give you the framework for how to play, but some rules might be slightly different by the time you get this into your own hands. So please be aware, and please double check your rulebook if anything seems maybe incongruent in this teach. Talking to you people watching like 6 months to a year from now who are grabbing this game off a local shelf and getting it to the table, well, tonight, I suppose. Okay, Rayman the board game. This is a platforming race game with a decent amount of hand management and a little bit of what could be called trick-taking play. Trick-taking not in the sense that you're following other people's cards, but instead you're trying to read the room, see what numbers might be left, and potentially play a card that allows you to move faster or slower than other players around the table so that you can position yourself better and take advantage of, well, where they are and where you aren't. Usually is the case because you're going to be slapping each other silly. There is a combative or take that element to this game. This also could be played solo against a boss or cooperatively against a boss as well. So if the take that combative racing system doesn't seem like quite the right game for you, there are other ways to approach Rayman. So if you love the IP, I think this game is going to fit a lot of players. That being said, let's go ahead and start diving down into this teach. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to determine the map that you would like out here on the board. I currently have the easiest Green Harbor level set up, but we also have this hellscape here, the Fiery Inferno. That's what we did the 4-player gameplay on. It was challenging, to say the least. A little bit of madness, so you're probably going to start here on this beautiful green map. You got to identify and make sure players around the table know all the symbols that they're seeing. We have platforms which can be jumped through. We have big drums which need to be, or obstacles that need to be ducked underneath. We have the starting line along with numbers around the outside edge. We have thorns which are going to deal damage to you if you don't hover over them when you move. We have enemies which you can smack to get a little bit of an advantage and also just clear them out of the pathway for you. And we have thorns that create barriers that you cannot pass through no matter what you do. So hazards and obstacles that make it a little bit harder to maneuver around the game state. Your character is going to be starting down here in this first zone, and you're going to be maneuvering around this board in clockwise motion, trying to be the first person to collect 3 objectives, which are going to be 3 Teensies that are hidden in cages around the board, and pass through that finish line ahead of all the other players. Now, at the very end of the game, it will be the player who passes the finish line and goes the farthest, indicating they were moving the fastest at that, camera flash, second-to-second, nose-to-nose, hairline victory they scored. After you pass that finish line, you will not have to worry about platforms, obstacles, objectives, anything else. So just all out blitz your way down that racetrack, make sure you have what you need to win, and then push your way past as far as you can go. So we're assuming that you're playing competitive. We're assuming that you're playing on this green map and everyone's kind of familiar with what's happening here. You'll have to then choose what character you're going to play, and you'll have to start by putting out the Teensy icons. Now, the standard rulebook does have a suggested setup, and they might have multiple of those by the time you have it in your hands, but the way that we like to do it is just randomize. Every player gets one or a number of these. When I did solo mode, I kind of just tossed them out and let them land where they landed, but you'll be placing these out onto the map. They cannot go in the same location. Other than that, I don't believe there are any restrictions to how they are placed, because you're going to have to come through and encounter them. For the most fun experience, definitely a wider distribution is better than some tight-knit corner, but who knows, that could also be a very unique experience as well, where you all kind of like bunch up in one area, grab all the crates you need by using slap actions all over the place, and then run your way forward, trying to get out of dodge as fast as possible. I don't know, I'm compelled by that. Now that I've mentioned that, I actually would love to give that a play. If you've chosen your character, you'll take your corresponding character deck. I'm going to go ahead and take our Gerlop, or Gerbox, Globox, our Globox character here. I literally have it written down, and I got it right in the last video that we're talking. I'm going to make sure that I'm saying it correct. It is Globox, our Globox character here. It's not that I didn't look up the names and don't try to make sure that I get terms and terminology right when I'm doing a teaching guide. It's called dyslexia. Let me know when you notice it in the comment section down below. Primarily when I stutter, when I read, and sentences come out a little bit scattered. All right, that was a tangent that wasn't necessary for a quick, efficient teaching video. We all have our standard set of 8 cards. These 8 cards are going to be numbered all the way 2 through 9. I didn't place them down in order because that would take additional time. These standard actions are going to have 4 core symbols that you're paying attention to. You have your move, forward or backward symbol with the arrow to the side. You have your jump with your arrow going up. You have your hover with the little symbol of Rayman with his, blades or whatever, his ears, his wings spinning on the top of his head. You have your slap, which is the hand that's smacking the heck out of people. Let me correct myself, 6 symbols. You have your heart, which is going to be a little bit of a defense against thorns and enemies on the board. And you have your duck, which is going to be Rayman here crouching. All these cards are going to be very similar. There is asymmetry. We'll talk about that at the very end of this teaching video. On your turn, you're going to be choosing 2 of these cards to play. For instance, the 9 and the 3. If I play the cards down like this, then the card on my left would determine my initiative order, this time being the 3. Typically, you will play so the highest value card is over to the left-hand side. That wasn't good for camera angles or efficiency at all. Yeah, let's just smash everything. The 9 being my initiative order, you'll typically play that higher card first because you'd like to move as quickly as possible to get away from everyone else who might be harassing you. But if you want to hold your punches, swing back a little bit, and hit someone from the backside, this could be a good option if you want to play a little bit slower. After you've selected those 2 cards, you're then going to go ahead and take your turn in initiative order. If you tie on initiative, like 2 players played a 9, your second card would then determine your initiative. If you tie again, you'll roll the dice to see who's the lucky first goer. You'll first determine how far you're moving. In this case, I have a total move of 7, and I would be spawning out here into this starting zone. I'll use this beautiful little arrow marker, which helps the efficiency of the game run so well. And I'll go ahead and move 7 spaces forward and make a mark there. That is how far I can move. Now it's just a matter of using the other skills and abilities as I press myself forward. So let's go ahead and give an example here and then talk about how we can actually progress in this game. I'll move forward here. I'll use my slap, one of the 3 that I have, to go ahead and hit that enemy that I have in front of me. I'll continue moving forward. I've made a tactical error because I don't have any jumps, but I would have gotten to draw a card, which immediately gave me a jump that I can use. So I will jump at this location, move forward using the second of my 3 slaps available to hit this enemy, drawing another little mini boost card. Gives me 2 more jumps. This one has technically been spent, so I'll set that over. Move forward again, move forward again. I have to end in this location, and I will go ahead and drop down, but I have a crouch, which means that I'm perfectly positioned for the next game. I won't get to hold on to that crouch, but I will need that crouch, or I'll need a crouch to slide underneath this location and go ahead and grab those additional tokens. This actually was turned the wrong way, which means I have 2 additional movement. If I would like to use it, I would go ahead and use that crouch, sliding under here, moving in to this location, which is now how far I can go, and smacking with the last smack that I have, that teensy cage, which is going to go ahead and get me one of the 3 teensies I need to win the game, as long assuming that I cross that finish line first. Of course, sorry that the orientation on this was not accurate when I first drew it. I didn't even know it was going to come out there, and that was a pretty efficient, a pretty effective play style. Let's back up and talk to you about all these actions that I did and how they operate. That was a good example, though, of how this game will flow. So your move action allows you, this top arrow action, allows you to go forward or backward. You'll calculate the total number of moves you have and place your arrow marker accordingly. But if you move backwards, because you have to move forward again, you'll reduce that arrow marker by 2, since you're now 2 spaces. Technically, you've used 1 movement to go back, you'll use 1 movement to go forward. You're 2 spaces away from where you could have been had you just helter-skelter rushed your way ahead. Your move action's pretty simple. However, it also has some caveats that you need to keep in mind. You can move through other characters, but you can't stop, or other players, but you can't stop on their location. You can move into enemies, but if you end up being unable to hit them, you'll have to expend a heart or you'll get knocked out. You can move on to thorns or onto obstacles or hazards, but again, if you do and you don't have a heart to spend or a hover to avoid them, you will end up taking a damage, and you could technically be pushed or moved into one of these obstacles and you would take a heart damage in that case as well. Slapping another player does not cause damage, by the way, but it does move them forward or backward depending on the orientation you are when you slap them. If you're in their zone, you can choose to push them in either direction. Along with that, if I move off of a platform and I don't have a hover, I have to immediately drop down as far as possible. If I have a hover, I can stay there and move forward. So that's your movement. Next action that we should talk about will be the jump action. Jump action's pretty straightforward. I can jump up 1 space. I can also jump up and use a move at the same time to jump and shift over by 1 space. I cannot go through obstacles. I can jump into enemies. I cannot go through obstacles. Thank you, dog, for the collar rattle. That was efficient for everyone. Can I have you? Can I have you? Nope, apparently we're not gonna spend time with me. We're just gonna make noise so that everyone's aware that there's a rattling little puppy walking around. I can jump up, but if I jump up into an enemy, I'll have to be able to smack them or else I'll take a damage. And I can't jump from underneath these obstacles. Pretty straightforward. That's the jump action. Moving over to the slap action. The slap action, well, let's do the 2 things that are related to movement. My duck action and my hover action. Both of these actions will extend for as long as necessary until you land on a viable second target or decide to end your movement. For instance, here, my hover action would be able to bring me 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that hover action would stop when I reached that platform on the other side. But if I was down here on the second level, I could go 1, 2, and then because this is a viable platform that I could stop on, my hover action would pause, and I'd have to have a second hover action to move to this next platform, and so on and so forth. Same thing with my duck action. I could duck underneath this platform or this obstacle, or I could duck underneath both of these by using 1 duck action alongside my standard movement that I have. I can slap while I'm in air, but I can't continue hovering if I use a slap while I'm in air. So let's go ahead and talk about that slap action that we have. I can slap immediately in the location that I'm in, or I can slap far away. I can slap this enemy, gaining a card. Every time you knock out an enemy, you're going to gain a little bonus card. These bonus cards have the same exact symbols on them with the inclusion of a loom, which is this top little 2-eared symbol there at the top. We'll talk about those again at the very end of this teach. My slap action can also extend. So if I'm standing here, I could go ahead and spend 1 for the distance, 2 to do the hit. Or if I was standing a little bit farther away, I could spend 1, 2, 3 to go ahead and do the hit. You can hit, I believe, 3 spaces away, and I can hit up. So if I was standing underneath one of these platforms, I could spend 1, 2, 3 to hit the enemy right above me, or a cage. If there was a cage within reach that I could go ahead and access. I can hit other players, but that will not cause them damage unless, of course, I hit another player and cause them to move into a zone where there's an enemy or a set of thorns or traps or obstacles. That would cause them 1 point of damage, making them lose a heart, meaning that, well, I've just been a little bit cruel. If you don't have a heart to expend, you cannot block that damage, you will then be knocked back 2 spaces. So it's a good way to debuff someone if they're not in position to protect themselves. These hearts are lovely. These hearts, you can get a maximum of 1 of them at a time, and they just act as a little bit of a block. So I could go stand on an enemy and not take a damage. I could go move through a thorn bush and not take a damage. Allows you to get a little bit of flexibility if someone's being cruel in the game state, or if you just need to skirt past someone and you forgot to put a slap or a hover there in order to avoid some of the damage that you'd be imposed. You can't spend a heart to just squeeze your way underneath an obstacle. Sadly, they do become barriers and they block your path of movement. I think that's all the actions we have here with the exception of looms, which we're not going to talk about right now. So that's the core function. That's the core foundation of the game. You're going to be drawing your cards. You're going to be playing 2 of them down. You're going to be taking the corresponding actions, trying to move across the board, hitting 3 of the 4 cages that are out there, collecting the Teensies. Once you have 3 of them, and you can see that by tracking it here on this board, you then want to be the first person across the finish line. You can only get 1 Teensie from each cage. You want to then be the first person across the finish line, and you will be the victor of the game, or the farthest person across the finish line on the round that the first person finishes. Hope that makes sense. You can have a maximum of 4 of these little cards. They are all oriented the same direction, which is something that I caught there just in time to allow me to preserve. If you ever would draw more, you can discard or immediately go ahead and use one to open up a space. You can use them at any point on your turn. You can use turns and actions in any order or orientation that you would like. Outside of that core teach, all we have to go over now is the micro expansions that we have. And I'm not going to go into detail too deeply on them, but so you have a sense of the variability that you could add in. We have first the legendary cards. These cards are going to allow you to convert those looms that I was referencing earlier into extra special abilities. So if you have one of those at the top of your card and you've included this, you then can convert it into, well, a corresponding icon. They're all different. And you have an extra ability, like you can use a second hover to stay in the air between turns. If you do so, gain 1 additional movement. That's kind of nice. Or you can use a crouch to avoid an enemy and gain 1 additional movement. Again, just pushing you a little bit farther, giving you more flexibility with how you progress and shift your way across this board. I advise drafting these or doing some type of randomized draw, because when we played our way, Shira might have taken the most violent one and might have punched me in the face multiple times. We also have our cards. These are asymmetric player power cards that provide you with cool, unique abilities, different numbers, all the way up to 10 potentially, and a little bit longer of an action cycle, because you could take a bubble action on your turn. A bubble action is an action that allows you to reset your hand. If you have no cards to play, you have to take a bubble action. If you want to take a bubble action early, you're certainly welcome to. You become invulnerable, invincible. You are unable to be touched by anything for that cycle, as long as you decide to include that rule. It's a little bit more of a friendly rule. There is an alternative rule in this game that says you don't have to include that. All of this is highly modular, which means you could just take all the pummeling necessary and be set back like 2 or 3 spaces. If the other players around the table decide that they want to go, you take a bubble action too early, and they really just wreck you. Okay, well, with that in mind, bubble action resets your hand. This is going to add 2 cards to your hand. All of these are varied and different, and the way you'll do it is you'll draw up to the number of players plus 2. You'll then do a draft, starting with one of the players, moving clockwise. Then you'll do a second draft, starting with one of the players, the last player to choose, and moving the opposite direction around. Kind of like a snake draft in essence. So you're going to have a set of cards. You're going to be able to add 2 of them to your hand, giving you a total of 10 cards in your hand. These added, in my opinion, a lot of variability and a lot of fun and interest to the game. Last things that we have to add in. You have the rockets. Rockets are going to start spawning after the first round of the game. They're going to be coming in your direction from wherever your last zone was, either the starting zone or the middle zone if someone has already crossed that. They're going to be spinning and spiraling back at you, kind of like this. So as you're racing down the track, at the end of every round, they're going to move 7 spaces forward in a straight line. You're going to roll a dice to determine where another one comes out. Like that's a 4, so that means one would spawn here in this middle zone. And they're going to collide, hit, and explode on the first thing they come across. So good for them, I suppose. For me, this turned into a real big problem multiple times, because if you don't have a heart and you get hit by a rocket, you get knocked back a space. And if you get knocked back a space and you take additional damage, you get knocked back more spaces. It can create a chaining, catastrophizing series of events that just makes you a few spaces farther back than you'd originally planned, and the cards that you played, that you were working with, completely different for this next turn and this next round. Finally, the last thing we have is we have our boss. Our boss or bosses, depending on how many they've incorporated into the game. I'm sure there's going to be more than just the one that I have here in the prototype. I have the Armored Toad. They're going to have a set or series of variable cards, and this is how the cooperative mode is going to run. They're going to be placed down on the board. After you all have gone, they're going to start running down the track, rolling a dice to determine the randomness that they're getting or where they're positioned. They're going to be trampling you as they run past, and they're going to be drawing one of their effect cards, which is going to have an impact on you, the players, or on the board state itself, making enemies tougher, making you drop down from levels, potentially making it so that he moves farther, faster, and hungrier. So that is the core structure. And I think that's a teach. I think that's a breakdown. I think that's how you play Rayman the board game. I'm pretty sure. Like, I think I went through all the little details and nuance elements that I wanted to highlight while we played. I don't know For sure. I mean, there's definitely things that I might have missed. Like, for instance, your hover action can allow you to, move across, and then I could hover and drop down. I could also move over here, hover, and drop down there. But if I wanted to hover from the second zone, I then would have to spend another hover to be able to position myself and move forward. Other than that, I think you're ready to play. Go ahead and open up a copy of the game, hop in, and experience the fun. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Whatever the case, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. Play Rayman on the table. Why not? If you're a fan of the video game, if you're a fan of the IP and the lore, why spend all the time hanging out in front of your computer? Get a group of friends together. Get some good drinks. Have some good laughs. Laughter is apparently really healthy. Also, potentially an aphrodisiac. Aphrodisiac. I think that's the right term. So, there you have it. We'll see you later. Bye.